All right. Welcome everybody to TEDxSantaClaraUniversity 2021 Reimagine Tomorrow. We're so excited to have all of you guys on here this live stream, joining from Facebook, joining from YouTube. We're very excited about this annual conference because given, what's been going on, all the uncertainty, our team was able to push through and get an amazing lineup of speakers for you guys, both today, obviously at 4 p.m. and tomorrow at 2 p.m. So I'm very excited for all of you to hear the ideas that they have that are worth spreading. Before we get kicked off into that, I want to give a huge thanks to the team behind the scenes that makes this possible, that helps us get these speakers, that help bring you here today. So really want to give a shout out to the TEDx Santa Clara University speaker team. Doing an amazing job getting these amazing speakers that you're going to hear shortly. And also want to thank our marketing team for doing a fantastic job bring you all here today. As you may know, we'll have a raffle, which we'll have at the end of all of our talks, so stay tuned for that. Very excited for those who signed up and got an entry, and also for those who shared our event around who got multiple entries. So thank you all. Without further ado, I would love to get our event this year kicked off. And we are going to start very special guest. He runs the YouTube channel called Soft White Underbelly. And he's going to talk to us today about all the lessons that he's learned and his takeaways from having over 3,000 interviews. I don't know if any of you guys have had the chance to check out his YouTube channel, but over 2 million subscribers, very inquisitive and interesting talks that he has with some people who are underprivileged, going through certain things that maybe aren't highlighted. And really, Mark is bringing all this to the forefront. So without further ado, I would love to welcome Mark to the stage. And again, thank you all for being here, and let's get the show kicked off.
We ready to go? All right. I'm often asked why I created my YouTube channel, Soft White Underbelly. When I began shooting portraits and interviews of drug addicts, gang members, pimps and prostitutes, gamblers, hillbillies, and other subcultures 11 years ago, I never even thought about why I was doing it. In my mind, I was just doing another one of my dark and disturbing side projects, which seemed to be a good bookend to the slick and polished advertising work I'd done all my life. It seemed interesting, and that was reason enough for me back then. But sometimes we do things for reasons that even we don't understand, only to find out much later why we did them. So here are some of the things I've learned in doing a few thousand interviews with alcoholics, mobsters, and strippers. One of the most powerful Soft White Underbelly interviews I've done was with Jerry Nave, a man who lost a large portion of his face as well as most of his vision from a point-blank shotgun blast to the right side of his head while he was waiting at a bus stop on his way home from work one night. I first saw Jerry panhandling about 6 years ago when he was living on the streets of Skid Row. His face was terribly disfigured, but after speaking with him, it was clear that Jerry was very friendly. I'd often find Jerry and help him out, and eventually I ended up paying his expenses for the apartment he lived in for a few years before he passed away last fall from COPD complications. Jerry's life was changed drastically on the night he was shot. But his ability to forgive and let go is such a beautiful mystery to me. In that interview, I asked Jerry what he'd say to the person that shot him. Jerry's response was, "I still love you. I forgive you." What would give someone the ability to forgive like that? Jerry's ability to forgive the gunman, despite all he'd lost, is such an impressive testament to the transformative power of forgiveness. Jerry held absolutely no anger towards the person who robbed him of so much, and because he was totally able to forgive, Jerry was free of the hatred and anger that many of us would have felt. we'd often have lunch, and I can say without any doubt that Jerry was the most lighthearted and positive person I've known. Being a friend and helping Jerry when everyone else was afraid to even talk to him. Made me feel different about myself. Jerry was like an angel hidden behind a scary mask in the middle of the hell that Skid Row is. Another important thing I've learned in doing these talks is how incredibly valuable honesty is. I've done many interviews with men and women who've shared their stories of being victims of sexual abuse as children. In some cases, this was the first time they'd ever shared their stories. You can just feel all the pain and shame being released as Star, Carl, or Tyrone talk about their childhoods. All these people later told me how much better they felt to finally talk about what happened to them and how the weight of their secret was lifted. They felt free. As a couple of the female interviewees said in their talks, "You're only as sick as your secrets." I've seen in doing these talks that once guilt or shame become part of our lives, it becomes so much harder for us to do the right things moving forward. Shame destroys a person's self-worth and is likely to make us feel undeserving of love or kindness, even if it was offered to us. I believe that treating a person with dignity and respect is the only way positive change can ever happen. Shaming them only reinforces their already bad self-image. So many of us don't seem to understand this, and that's the real shame. Perhaps the most powerful thing I ever read was from one of the early Course in Miracles books, which said that everything we do is either an act of love or an act of fear. In listening to these stories, it seems so much of what we do is out of fear. Fear of not getting our share, fear of not being loved, fear of being wrong, fear of getting hurt. We seem to create whatever we defend against, meaning that if we act out of fear, we're more likely to create what we're afraid of. If you're acting out of fear that your partner might leave you, you can rest assured that eventually you'll lose them. If you run a business out of fear of going broke, you'll probably go broke. Fear, or said another way, is a lack of courage, is another thing that seems to be undermining our happiness. It takes courage to let someone know that you've fallen in love with them. It takes courage to start a business without any guarantee it'll be successful. It takes courage to put your work out in the world, not knowing if anyone will respond positively to it. But having courage is exactly what we need if we're ever going to find true happiness. And without happiness, we find ways to numb the depression we feel with drugs, alcohol, gambling, shopping, eating, or other vices. Love. Here's what listening to all these stories taught me about love. It seems that some of us don't understand the difference between love and unconditional love. Many of us had parents who loved us if we got good grades, if we stayed out of trouble, if we weren't gay, or in jail, or whatever. Have you ever had a partner who loved you only because you were attractive, or because you supported them financially, or only if you behaved exactly the way they wanted you to? Once there are conditions on love, it isn't felt as love at all. And without ever feeling truly loved, a person can't help but try to escape the pain of not being loved, which opens a door to escapes like drugs and all the other vices I've named. Unconditional love is powerful, but it's rare. With it, we learn to value and respect ourselves. We learn that we believe we're worthy of the love of a great partner, and we learn that we have to offer what we have to offer. And we learn that what we have to offer the world has value. Amongst all the tragedies and horrors you'll hear in my interviews, there have been some miracles as well. There's a young woman named Amanda who I've interviewed several times on my channel. Amanda would walk the streets of Skid Row barefoot, wearing nothing but a tank top in search of ways to get crack cocaine. She'd stay up all night, she'd go anywhere and do anything to get the drugs she wanted. My interviews with Amanda show her deterioration of her body, teeth, and her mind. Any attempts to get her help would result in Amanda getting violent or doing something dangerous to escape. I'd often see her beaten up, and she'd disappear for weeks, and she seemed destined to die on Skid Row. Through my channel, Amanda's family contacted me. Her father, Larry, and I would speak often, and we were starting to lose hope of finding any way to save his daughter. Every conversation would end with one of us just saying, man, we need a miracle. Then out of nowhere came an email. Sorry. From a woman named Lima Javremovich, who has a company named Aura that works with therapists and rehabs. Lima wanted to show the world how, Lima wanted to choose one of my interviewees to show how effective rehab can be when it's done correctly. Lima and I spoke about which of my interviewees to choose, and I gave her a dozen names who I felt would have a good chance of recovering. Or I told her you could choose Amanda, the most impossible case you could find. Incredibly, Lima chose Amanda. And today, because of Lima's help and courage, Amanda is a completely different person. She no longer has the obsession to use her drug. She communicates perfectly and plans to become a nursing assistant after she finishes 5 more months of rehab. Amanda's story seems like a miracle. So back to the question I'm often asked. Why am I doing Soft White Underbelly? Why do I create these videos? After my divorce 6 years ago, I realized how terribly destructive some of my actions were to my wife, my children, and to myself. And I wanted to figure out how and why I could be my own worst enemy sometimes. Why would I sabotage my own happiness and allow myself to self-destruct? As Eric, one of my interviewees, a recovered crack addict, said, if anyone ever effed me over as badly as I did myself, I'd kick his ass. Through these interviews, I'm learning how and why I did these things and what I can do to prevent it in the future. I've seen how important it is to take 100% of the responsibility for everything I do in life. I understand how total honesty with myself and others is always going to turn out best. I've learned how forgiveness, especially for those it's difficult to forgive, is the key to releasing the hatred and anger we carry and inflict on ourselves in the end. I see how loving myself and those in my life unconditionally is the best way to make my life better. I've realized that courage is incredibly important because so much of living a full life requires courage. Being honest takes courage, forgiving takes courage, loving another person, and being successful in your career take courage. So whether it's Jerry's incredible act of forgiveness, the vulnerability and honesty of many of the sexual abuse survivors I've interviewed, or Lima's random act of kindness, or making a miracle happen for Amanda, I'm hoping that by sharing these painful but enlightening stories through Soft White Underbelly, we might learn some things that might help us find the courage to become kinder to each other, our children, and ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Fantastic sentiments around courage and really powerful stuff around the people that you've interviewed and just hearing the different things that you've been through. And thank you for the work that you've been doing. I'm sure all of us here had a lot to take away from that talk. And now we're going to move forward to Maggie, who's not able to be with us today, but has left us a recorded video to share. And really, Maggie's focusing on how can we burst our bubbles? How can we get out of our comfort zones And how can we take that next step to really learn more about the individuals that are most neglected in our societies? Maggie had, grown up and Santa Clara alum, went to this university and, worked at a large corporation and didn't feel full inside with what she was doing, and, sought out a new mission and sought out to do something new and impactful with her life. And here's the idea that she has to share with you all today about that journey and about bursting your own bubble.
Spent at Santa Clara University were a bit hazy. One thing I distinctly remember is always being nervous about checking my bank account. And my response was just to hardly ever check it. I was working a job on campus, and I'm a pretty frugal person, so I was just hoping it would all balance itself out. I also thought that my debit card had overdraft protection on it, so the worst thing that could happen is that my card would get denied. I'd suffer a little bit of embarrassment and not be able to eat that chocolate chip ice cream I ordered at Mission City Creamery or drink the vodka cranberry at the Hut. So I went along, hardly ever checking my account, and any thought of my bank account would bring with it these full body waves of anxious feelings. And rather than listening to those feelings and addressing what was making me feel uneasy and just taking the few minutes to check my banking account app and face those numbers, I'd shove the thoughts out of my brain, distract myself with literally anything else. And there's no shortage of distractions at Santa Clara. But there was this one time I had let the pattern go on a little longer than usual, and I actually couldn't suppress the anxious feeling in my chest any longer. So I remember being so relieved when I checked my account and I saw $200. That relief turned into confusion when I noticed the parentheses around the $200, and then it settled into panic when I realized that meant negative 200. How did this happen? I mean, yeah, I hadn't checked my account in a while, but with my spending habits, $200 would have taken a really long time to rack up. And remember, I didn't even think my account could go negative. And oh my God, what are my parents going to say? And even then, there was this part of me that wanted to ignore the problem, pretend like it wasn't actually happening, and not even tell my parents. But at that point, I also knew that I had to own it. And so when I looked more closely at the numbers, I realized I had made just 4 purchases: a Rosalina's breakfast burrito, Tic Tacs, a Starbucks, and gas. And each one of those 4 purchases came with its own $30 overdraft fee, hence the $200. Now, I don't like admitting this failure, but in reflecting, I've converted it from a shameful college mistake into a $200 lesson. So let me share. 1, it's illogical to ignore a problem and just hope it's going to resolve itself. 2, don't wait until the anxiety is overwhelming to act. 3, avoiding an issue compounds the issue. And 4, there's not always going to be an obvious flashing alert when it's time to act. These all seem really obvious in regards to my bank account, but they also apply to this desire I have to ignore all things that are uncomfortable in my life. And I'm not alone in this tendency. People of privilege, like myself, turn a blind eye to suffering and disengage from difficult dialogue. We keep ourselves busy and distracted, so there's no time or energy left to deal with the issues like racism, climate change, and inequality. But that's not logical. When white people pretend that racism isn't rampant, we're actively perpetuating systemic racism. And when we don't consider the environmental effects of our actions, we're accelerating the destruction of our planet. And when we call the police because we see an unhoused person in our neighborhoods, instead of questioning the systems that allowed the person to live there in the first place, we are exacerbating the inequality in our community. We have to change, and I don't know what we're waiting for. Our world is going deeper into the red, and there's no overdraft protection. We need to tune into, not tune out, the voice in our head and the feeling in our body when we see suffering. That discomfort is our conscience, and it's our alert that it's time to act. It's time to burst your bubble. But who am I to tell you what to do? I was born and raised in Manhattan Beach, California. It's my happy place. And it's also a bubble. And don't just take my word for it, because there's an entire comic called The Bubble just dedicated to making fun of Manhattan Beach. And we deserve it too. I had a very insulated, idyllic, and privileged childhood, completely sheltered from the suffering of the world and even the rest of Los Angeles. And when it came time for me to leave Manhattan Beach and go off to college, I just transported myself from one bubble to the next. In the first 2 years at Santa Clara University, I hardly ever ventured outside of a few blocks from campus, and I never read local news. And I only focused on getting good grades and having a good time. Then something happened my junior year. I enrolled in the class Architects of Solidarity to check the box for my experiential learning and social justice credit, having no idea that that class was about to alter the course of my life. On the first day of class, Professor Riley told us about the jungle. The jungle was the largest homeless encampment in the United States, and all of the people were forced out in 2014, while I was a student at Santa Clara. It was 10 miles from campus, and I had never heard of it. But most importantly, we didn't just talk about homelessness within the walls of our classroom. Professor Riley, knowing the power of connection and encounter, took us out into the greater Santa Clara community. On one Wednesday field trip, we visited a park and spoke with some of the unhoused residents that were living there. For the first time, I wasn't rushing past, pretending not to notice the tense, face buried in my phone, desperate not to make eye contact. Instead, I was present. I was listening, and I was allowing myself to be transformed. Inequality and suffering were no longer these abstract concepts to be discussed with detached intellectualism in my political science classes. But instead, they were right in front of me in the stories of this man who had been living 10 minutes away from me for the last 2 years. That is the sound of a hole being poked in my bubble. I realized I had been intentionally keeping about a 10-mile buffer between myself and anything or anyone that would cause me discomfort and challenge my understanding of the world and my place within it. I thought back to where I grew up, and instead of just thinking about my 2 square miles of paradise, I thought about what was 10, 20 miles away from Manhattan Beach. I thought about Skid Row, and I thought about the gross inequality that existed in the divide. My bubble didn't burst completely that day, or even that quarter. But I didn't try and patch it up either. And as the hole in my bubble keeps expanding and the air rushes out faster, it makes a huge difference. And I believe I'm a much better person for it. It's like we're all navigating this backcountry wilderness called life, using the tools at our disposal to blaze a trail. And on that day in class, my internal compass was knocked a few degrees. And a single degree might sound inconsequential, but when you travel a mile in that new direction, you'll be about 90 feet from where you expected to be. And in the last 6 years, I've gone a lot further than a mile. To show you, I made a graph because this is supposed to be a TED Talk. The red line represents my life as I've let the air leak out of my bubble. Those plot marks described on the right represent major life decisions. The slope becomes steeper as I push myself further outside my comfort zone, make more meaningful connections, and expand my capacity for understanding our complex world. Now, the gray line represents how much I believe I would have evolved as a person entrapped in my bubble. In 2019, when I first started volunteering at the Hippie Kitchen, a soup kitchen on Skid Row in Los Angeles, it was mentally and physically exhausting. I was miles outside of my comfort zone, and oftentimes forcing a smile when what I was really feeling was shock, confusion, and sometimes even fear. After a 6-hour volunteering shift, I would retreat back to Manhattan Beach and nap for 2 to 5 hours just to recover. And part of that was the residual sting in my eyes from chopping a 50-pound bag of onions, but it was also because of the sting in my heart. The sting from accepting that there's nothing but luck in a white supremacist culture separating me from the people experiencing homelessness. I haven't worked harder, smarter, or made better decisions. I was just born with better options. And when I did make mistakes, the police officers let me call my parents or let me off with a warning. They didn't burden me with fines, chain me to a criminal record, or use any type of violence against me. They saw me as I was, as an imperfect human, and that is only because I am a small, white, cisgender girl. My friends on the street are not afforded the same grace and dignity. These are realities I have only understood by letting go of my bubble. And even though our systems dehumanize the people living on the street, those same discarded individuals show me what it means to be human each day. There's this young woman I often see when I'm working outside the kitchen, and usually she's pacing back and forth in the street, talking out loud to no one and not wearing any shoes, looking super distressed. She is the epitome of somebody I would have desperately tried to avoid in the past, but not anymore. So I've tried multiple times to approach her, to offer her shoes, food, or water, and each time she seems not to see or even hear me, and I've had no luck. This scene unfolded yet again. The only difference this time is that she was carrying a quart of milk. And as she walked by, this raspy voice piped up next to me, "Can I have some milk?" And the young woman stopped mid-stride, beelined over to where I was standing, and without saying a word, poured out half of her jug of milk into an empty water bottle and walked off. Whoa. I felt very fortunate to witness that moment, to see the Skid Row community looking out for each other. And they've looked out for me too. Now, after a full day of service, I don't need a nap at all. In fact, I feel invigorated by the work. The initial shock has worn off, and my silent confusion has turned into productive conversations. And this constant fear replaced by a sense of belonging in the community. Now, popping bubbles isn't all fun and games like it was when we were kids. Some days it's still scary and draining, but I'd rather keep putting in the work and prioritizing the basic needs of other humans over my own comfort. Right now, it is uncomfortable for me to be here encouraging you to burst your bubble. I've been praised for being a peacemaker all of my life, and I've been really proud of that. I thought being a peacemaker meant minimizing conflict and making sure everyone around me felt at ease. But what I've learned from working on Skid Row, attending protests, and having vulnerable conversations with my community members is that we are not entitled to peace of mind when our neighbors, humans, don't have shelter, food, and dignity. And that is what we try and provide at the Hippie Kitchen. Every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday, we serve beans, salad, bread, and water to meet the physical needs of hunger and thirst. But we really try to serve compassion, dignity, and connection to meet those human needs. Dorothy Day said, "The only solution is love." And Thich Nhat Hanh says, "Another name for love is understanding." How can we understand and love our neighbor if we don't know them, or if we don't understand how our actions affect them? Now, I'm not here because I've ended homelessness on Skid Row. It's a lot more challenging than my finances, which, by the way, I can manage now. I'm here because just a few years ago, I was right where you are now. And I wish I would have started my journey sooner. So I challenge you to start today. Have a vulnerable conversation with somebody you disagree with. Smile and wave at your unhoused neighbor. Start building a relationship. Volunteer at a direct service organization in your community. And reflect on these questions. What would happen if we all stopped spending so much time and energy reinforcing our bubbles and started working to dismantle systems of oppression? What if we stopped trying to separate ourselves from each other and instead tried to see our shared humanity? What if we built a longer table and not a higher wall? We would inhabit a world where people are seen, loved, and valued, not canceled, cast out, or caged. And if that sounds like something that you are interested in, then let's get poppin'. Thank you.
Let's get popping. You heard Maggie. Thank you so much, Virtually Maggie. Obviously, you guys see she wasn't able to be here in person, but fantastic talk, fantastic call to action. And I know all of us here watching will take a lot from what Maggie just had to share with us. Now, jumping into our final talk of today. As you know, we have 3 more talks tomorrow. We have a very special speaker who's coming to talk to us today, the Chief Strategy Officer for the San Francisco 49ers. We kind of got into it as I'm a Bears fan, but hopefully he'll forgive me for that. We're super excited to welcome in Moon, who's going to be talking really about how we can come together and have a good time watching sports, and really share some insights for us behind some things that we don't know that go on behind the scenes at a sports franchise. And I'm very excited to hear what he has to share today. I'm very excited to welcome him to the stage. So without further ado, we'll welcome in Moon, our final talk of the day.
I can still feel the confetti dropping down and the hope and energy that permeated the stadium. It was electric. It was January 2019, and the San Francisco 49ers had just won the NFC Championship game. You could feel the happiness in the air. That is what I love about sports. I believe that sports brings us all together and creates a positive impact. I'm not the first person to say this, of course. We know the great Nelson Mandela said, "Sport has the power to change the world. It has the power to inspire. It has the power to unite people in a way that little else does. It speaks to youth in a language they understand." He felt strongly that rugby could help unify a country after apartheid. Was he right? Well, let's examine this in a bit more detail. In order for sports to have a profound impact, it has to appeal to us emotionally, and it has to have reach. So let's tackle reach first and examine website traffic, TV ratings, and social media. First, website traffic. Where does ESPN rank on the most viewed websites last year? 22nd, just ahead of all these major news publications, New York Times, CNN, and Fox News. What about TV? 90% of the top broadcasts last year were sports, and we can actually trace that back much further. In fact, 29 of the 30 most watched single programs of all time are sports. The other, in case you're curious, the match series finale. Let's look at social media. The largest influencer in the world on Insta? You guessed it, an athlete, Cristiano Ronaldo. So yes, sports does have reach. In order for sports to have a profound impact, it must create that emotional and psychological connection. When we look at our content at the 49ers, we understand that our best content is what we call under the helmet. These are the personal stories of our players. Some of us have seen some sports shows on Netflix or Amazon Prime, such as my favorite, Leeds Take Us Home, or Formula One Drive to Survive. When we watch these shows, we are investing in these athletes and forming our personal connection. That's why fans are consuming sports on the internet, TV, and social media, to be connected. So we believe that our fans want to form a personal connection and have a personal vested interest in the success of our team. Is there any science that backs that up? Well, I'm glad you asked. In one of my favorite studies, in 1976, psychologist Robert Cialdini led a series of studies in which he sent observers to 7 major schools such as LSU and Ohio State. The observers sat in lecture halls on Mondays following a big game on Saturday. At schools where the team won, the percentage of students wearing team apparel was far greater than if the team had lost. So after a win, you guys are much more likely to visit the Broncos Center and wear some gear to class, an effect we call basking in reflected glory. The study further examined our language following a game. If the team won, the students were far more likely to say, "We won," to further associate themselves with the team. However, if the team lost, they distanced themselves from the team by saying they lost. And that's a super interesting finding. If we go Darwin for a split second and try to understand, what might be the driving forces and benefits to us as humans of creating these communal associations? Well, according to a study in 2017, sports fandom was associated with higher self-esteem, sense of belonging, and meaning of life. So sports does have reach, emotional appeal, and is backed by some psychological studies. Nelson Mandela was onto something. So now I know we can say our fans bring a ton of emotion when they watch our team play. But emotions don't act in a vacuum, meaning we can't just think about our emotions about watching a game in isolation. These emotions will spill over to other aspects of your experience that day. and I'll prove this with a video very soon. But before that, I've been on a quest to better understand fans and to help improve our fan happiness over the last 8 years on Sundays. To this end, we've run hundreds of thousands of surveys. So let's take a peek behind the curtains, and I'll walk you through 3 of my favorite observations on fan happiness and emotions during our events. First, as anyone that works in sports will tell you, winning is important. And it's not a shock. It's the most single important driver of your happiness on a given day. Over the last few years, the difference in satisfaction from when we win to when we don't get the result we want is 12%. But it gets really interesting when you can break this down in real time, which fortunately for us, we log tens of thousands of real-time interactions with our happy or not terminals. So let's take a look at this video. And before I hit play here, I want you to look at the score and I want you to look at the time. Those will change as I hit play. You can see on the left-hand side, a game against where we will lose to the Dallas Cowboys, and on the right-hand side, compared to a game where we win against the Jacksonville Jaguars. The green and red dots represent concession satisfaction, which should be independent from game score in theory, but this isn't theory. This is real life. Green is happy and red is not. So again, this is concession satisfaction, and let's hit play. So as I hit play here, you can start to see the score change, and you can start to see the time change. All of a sudden, you see Dallas is out to an early lead, and some dots get red. All of a sudden, our beers, they just got warm. On the right-hand side, our team's doing quite well. Over there, the beers are staying nice and cold. The video is running a little bit slow right now, so as it continues to go on the left-hand side, you'll see Dallas continues to run up the score here, and we start to get a lot more red. So all of a sudden now, our hot dogs are getting cold and all of our food is the wrong temperature. But on the right-hand side, everything is working out just fine. So hopefully this is a cool demonstration of how emotions do not act in a vacuum, and that our emotions on the game day do affect our emotions on other things that day. Next, we believe in peak end theory. An example of peak end theory in motion is at amusement parks. I love Cedar Point in Sandusky, Ohio. Every other year, they introduce a new roller coaster. And as a kid, I waited about 2 hours for this ride every summer. 2 hours for a 2-minute ride. And I loved it. The end to my experience was awesome. Now imagine if I rode the roller coaster first, then had to wait 2 hours to get off. Would I love roller coasters as much? So let's bring this back to peak end theory. It says that people judge an experience largely based on how they felt at its peak, most intense point, and at its end. In a famous study, participants put their hands in ice cold water for 60 seconds. They then repeated it, but this time they had to spend an additional 30 seconds in cold water, just a little less cold. They were then asked, which do you want to repeat? You're getting 60 seconds of total ice time in A. You're getting those exact same 60 seconds in B, plus an additional 30 seconds in a still bad experience, just not as bad. So what would you pick? The participants overwhelmingly chose B, to stay in the water longer, because it ended better. So what does this tell us about your game day happiness? Well, it has made leaving our stadium a point of emphasis of our work. We've made many improvements to increase our fan happiness during their exit. We added more lighting in the parking lots for night games, made it easier to access public transportation. We increased our pedestrian control with ropes so that fans don't walk haphazardly through parking lots. We do this all because getting out of games makes you happier. The third key observation is fans have a lot of trouble articulating what they actually want. Or is it that what fans do and what they say are different? We see this at Levi Stadium within our food and beverage experience. In the first few years, our fans clamored for more healthy food. So we were very excited to add salads and other healthy items. So what happened? Did our fans order these salads? Nope, they just ate more hot dogs. Later, our fans asked for more local restaurants. So we added Touchdown Terrace, filled with dozens of local restaurants. Now these were successful. So I thought we were onto something. However, when I broke down the sales, what were people ordering? just more beer. So we understand that people have difficulty articulating what they want and how much they are willing to pay for things. So we started using a conjoint analysis. The best way to explain a conjoint is to show you. How much would you pay for this cone? Now that's a pretty tough exercise for a lot of people. And I'm sure if I could poll all of you right now, I would have a wide variety of answers here. So instead, a conjoint puts choices in front of us that are more natural for us to make. It's a would you rather. So would you rather have chocolate ice cream for $1 or banana ice cream for $2? Okay. Would you rather have chocolate ice cream for $3 or mint ice cream for $2? Okay. You can also expand and add options to this bundle. Chocolate ice cream with no toppings for $2 or strawberry ice cream with nuts for $3. We leverage the same philosophy for our fans. We ask them about all-inclusive types of offerings, seating locations, and ticket prices. Would you rather sit at the 50-yard line and pay $100 with all-inclusive food? Or would you rather sit at the 30-yard line for $50 with pay-as-you-go food? It was clear from our work that our season ticket holders overwhelmingly favored an all-inclusive type of offering. So this year for our season ticket holders, we're launching the member-inclusive menu, where we will include the food the fans actually eat the most, not what they tell us they want the most. Things like hot dogs, chicken tenders, popcorn, pretzels, soft drinks, all included in the price of their tickets. So now that I've shared my 3 favorite observations, what was the result of hundreds of thousands of touch points and our hard work and dedication on experience? It's an overall improvement of 25% in our fan satisfaction over the last few seasons. In essence, 70,000 people are just a bit happier leaving games on Sunday in 2019 than they were in 2015. And that's pretty cool. Sports is an immensely powerful platform that brings communities together and can lift the spirits of cities and even countries. They make us laugh. They make us cry. They make us high-five and hug complete strangers. They bring millions together to celebrate and at times commiserate. As I go back and reflect upon that 2019 season, we fell short of our ultimate goal. But the feeling that is strongest with me from that season is magic. The connections I made with friends and random people across the country. The feeling of energy, hope, togetherness. These were all tangible. I could feel them. 2020 as a fan, it was very hard for me. Man, did I really miss seeing games in our home stadium last year. I might have even missed some of our red button pushes on those happy or not terminals. And upon further reflection on these stats right here, win or loss, these aren't that bad. Our fans are happy, which reinforces my belief in the power of sport. I cannot wait for us to all be back together in a stadium, in an arena, watching a game together, feeling the magic, feeling the energy in the air, reinvigorating our lives, and bringing back to life our communities out of this pandemic. So in short, let's come together, watch sports, and be happy.
Let's do it, Moon. Fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing your insights and really peeling behind the scenes for all of us on really what goes behind really your job, but also a franchise who helps keep all of us fans happy throughout every game. And I'm sure a lot of people are excited to hear about some of the new innovations that are working on and coming in this space between sports and technology. So now, obviously, after you guys have all heard these amazing talks that we've had today, we wanted to end it off today's special, as we do each day. And what I'm going to do now is bring on a Chief Marketing Officer, Matthew, to the stage, and he's going to do our first couple of draws for our raffle that we have going on. And once he does that, if you're selected as a winner, feel free to email us to TEDx@scu.edu. Let us know that you were the winner, and we'll be happy to send over your gifts. So let me bring up Matthew to the stage now.
Thanks, Darius. So yeah, I have the pleasure of announcing the winners for our raffle today. We're raffling off today 2 $50 DoorDash gift cards. Hopefully you should be able to see my screen. see here. Yeah, so the two winners today are Antonio Magallanes and Hannah Trio. Looks like both students, actually, since I see those student emails. So if you just want to send us an email at tedx@scu.edu, we'll get you hooked up with that. Thanks again, everyone, for joining. We'll have 3 more great speakers tomorrow at 2, so I'm really, really excited for that.
Awesome. Thank you, Matthew. There you go. To our 2 lucky winners, feel free to email us at tedx@scu.edu to claim your prizes. And everyone on the line, thank you so much. This is only part 1 of our 2-day event. And to thank our speakers, Mark, Maggie, and Moon, for sharing their amazing advice, and amazing thoughts and amazing stories, and really, ideas that are worth spreading. We're really excited, as an organization, to be able to host them and bring events like these in light of difficult times that are hopefully going to get better soon. So thank you all who are on the line. After myself, Darius, as president of the organization, excited to see you here. We'll see you tomorrow. Until then, have a great rest of your evenings. We'll see you tomorrow. Thanks so much.